and welcome back to my channel. It's Layah Heilpern here, and this week we're joined with well-known British journalist John Sweeney. John Sweeney is best known for his undercover work at BBC Panorama, where he's taken on Putin, taken on Scientology, and even gone undercover in North Korea. So if you like this video, then hit the subscribe button and hit the bell so you get notified every single time that I post, and drop a comment below telling me what topics you want to hear next week. And if you enjoy the video, don't forget to hit the like button. John Sweeney, such a pleasure having you today. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I miss the pub.
Yes,
I
I
miss the
know.
pub so much. I've been. I had a kind of a mild scare, so I've been inside for about a week. And today I walked all the way to St Paul's, and so I live in Vauxhall. It's not that far. It's beautiful walk along the river, and horrible as it is, I also felt that you could hear when the clock when the bells tolled in St Paul's, you could hear them so beautifully. It was so quiet, and some of this terrible thing that's ruined all our lives, and I hate it. I hate it. I hate it.
I've seen your panic diaries. I know you hate it.
But some of it is kind of, if we can keep just a bit of the quiet stuff, and of hearing birdsong, and the air is so clean now, and it really is. I mean, London is a different place. I hate what it's done. I miss everything. I miss the pubs. I miss people. I miss meeting my friends and my loved ones and my family, and blah 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 blah. But I do feel a lot greener. Anyway,
Yeah, no, I totally
we're not.
agree with you. No, I totally agree with you. Even for me, it's just, it gives you a chance just to get back to nature, doesn't it? Everything does feel just that much greener.
Yeah, there was a blackbird in a tree out back, and I live overlooking a council estate, and suddenly I'm turning into David Attenborough. There's a small blackbird, but it's trilling most beautifully, and I just thought, well, hey, this is. I mean, like, I would never have, given it a second's thought in the time before. And now, if a robin was to appear by my window, I have an orgasm.
Oh
That
my
can happen.
gosh. No, I mean, look, it's good. Always looking for a silver lining in everything. But I want to focus on your work at the BBC, because I think your work as an
Which I've
investigative
left.
journalist.
Which I've left, though.
Yes,
No,
yes,
I've left.
yes. No,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. But
your
anyway, we'll get to that. Yes.
yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
wasn't sure whether to
Happy
ask you or
days.
not about that, but your
Oh
work
no, you can
there.
ask me. Ask me at the end.
Yeah, all right. I'm going to ask you everything
Yeah.
then. So,
Sure,
your
sure.
work, well, you are well known for your work as an investigative journalist before at BBC Panorama. And as investigative undercover work goes, it can be quite dangerous. It can get quite messy, and we've seen a lot of that. And I want to look at your 2018 piece, Taking on Putin, because you did put yourself in quite a vulnerable position there. At times you were being followed. But for us, the viewer, it is just TV. So I want to know, have you ever actually feared for your safety?
Yes. Um, what you yes, but it's when I was a war reporter for the Observer from about 1988 to about 2000 that I used to take, or it felt like the risks were far greater. Certainly when I was a freelance back in '88, I'm fiddling with writing my memoirs, and it feels like writing your own obituary. So I keep on not finishing. I'm trying to write a pitch, and I keep on not finishing the pitch. But I can remember I went to Rwanda and Burundi in '88 as a freelance on my own, and I took terrible risks then. And it was grim, and you see awful things. You walk through a door. I saw a poor man who'd been macheted in the back of the head. I saw a kid, a tiny toddler with his arm had been amputated, and I took a photograph of her, and she cried, and I still have some flashbacks about stuff. So this is physical risk that you take, Sarajevo, those places. Towards the end of my kind of big time career, I was doing stuff. Who knows? It may not be over, but certainly the Putin film. that, I've got a producer, I've got a cameraman, Seamus McCracken, I've got a fixer. It's we're a great gang. We're great. We have great. I'm going to say comradeship. I can't pronounce camaraderie. Yes, I can.
There you go.
And the and we knew what we were doing. We were very, very disciplined, and we were followed all the time, and we just filmed them following them following us, them spying on us in various places. I got into the habit that were creepy Russian secret state people from the FSB, the secret police, the new name for the KGB, who were spying on me in restaurants, and I used to go up and film them all the time until my boss said, "Stop it, stop it, stop it." I said, "Well, but it was great fun, and I look back to that film with making that film with great affection and a funny way. It felt it was the best bit of working for the BBC. We're in a tough place. We're in the front line, but boy, were we working together as a team. Yes, we were. It was good.
And you mentioned your work at the Observer, where you saw some incredibly gruesome things. So how then do you weigh up the pursuit of the truth, compared to your safety? How do you sort of say, yes, this is worth it? Because particularly in Russia, it just is that scary. And even your work, in North Korea, which we'll get to, how do you weigh up that?
It's a strange it's a strange thing in that you're aware of the risk and you look at it, and you have to fill in forms, risk assessment forms, blah, 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 blah. But there's a certain point, and this has always been a thing for me, is that I love stories, I love storytelling, and the best stories are the stories powerful people don't want told. So my first really risky story I did in Russia was a film when I was at the Observer, and I did a film for Channel 4 Dispatches about the war in Chechnya. And we went undercover the war in Chechnya, and that was super scary, really frightening. But I felt so angry that Vladimir Putin and the entire Russian military machine and his secret state were bent on stopping us from getting there. So we all felt, can I swear, by the way, on this?
Yes, go for it. Yes, do it. Do it.
I just said, well, fuck you, Vladimir Putin. You are not going to fucking stop me. And so what happens is you get this kind of crazy override. It's not crazy. It feels like we're going to do this, and you go for it. And then later, there are moments. I did a second thing in Chechnya, about Chechnya. I went there. I went in. I got a series of radio interviews with Chechens who've been tortured. Now, remember them. It's a Muslim country that wants independence. Russia won't give it. There's a tremendous fault line there, and some of the people were Islamists who will have ended up supporting things like 9/11 and Islamic State, but this is 2000, and the Russian state, what Vladimir Putin was doing, was unbelievably cruel in terms of torture. And I got the story, I listened to all these accounts, and then I can't sleep at night. And so worse than the physical fear is the psychological effect of this stuff on you. And I used to get to sleep I had a copy of P.G. Wodehouse's Code of the Worcesters, and I read that, and I'd drink maybe a half, maybe 3/4 of a bottle of vodka to get to sleep. And then you'd wake up in the middle of the night, and I'd go back to pay, and then I'd reread the Code of the Worcesters, and then hit some more. And it's just, this is the harder thing, I think, than the physical fear, which generally it hasn't bothered me too much, because I'm a bit of a twat, frankly.
So essentially, you need thick skin. But I think it's really interesting to hear that it's not so much just your physical safety. There's also that mental sanity. Hearing that you have to read to get to sleep, or that you have to drink vodka to sort of make it through the next day. Is a lot, and I think it's very commendable, really, that you put the pursuit of the truth before your own sanity there. But Growing up, did you always say, yes, that's what I want to do? I want to be on the front line. I want to be putting my life at risk. And did you have any self-doubt along that way when you finally decided, yes, I want to be a Panorama reporter or whatever it is? How much self-doubt was there getting to that point?
Oh, I've always I'm. You would never know, but I am my own biggest critic. There's a lot to criticize, and I've got a fair measure of self doubt, particularly after I do something and then it's afterwards you think, well, what are you doing? What are you doing, you old fool? When I was a kid, I wanted to be a lawyer, and I went along to we brought up in Manchester, and then we moved down to Hampshire at the age of 10. And so at 15, I went to Winchester Crown Court, got into the back of a court, and it was a rape case. And the defence lawyer, and I wanted to be a defence lawyer, ripped the victim to shreds. And I thought, I don't want to do that. That's morally obnoxious. I don't want to be put in a place where I'm doing something which just feels completely wrong. And I think, as a reporter, I have never ever done something which I've never done something against my own will. So if there's a boss who says do that, then there are times when I will say, no, I'm not going to do that. And some
But
of
how
the
do you
time,
make that decision? How do you make that decision?
it feels it's common sense, common humanity. Also, is there another way of getting to this point without doing that? And it's an argument. I mean, like, I can remember one BBC boss said that you're impossible to manage. The deputy editor, there was a deputy editor of the Observer who sent me a snotty. It was a memo. This is before emails, and he wanted me to do a piece about there was a headmaster of a public school that had been caught with a prostitute, and I thought it was a pathetic story not worth the Observer writing about, and I refused to do it. And he sent me an angry memo back, and I sent him a memo back in kind. And he sent me a memo back saying, the next time you send a memo like that, I'm going to break your fucking neck.
Oh my gosh.
So,
And did you send one again? Did you send another one?
No,
Oh, you
no.
didn't.
But he got the message, and I didn't write actually, they put more pressure on me to write the piece, and I wrote it in verse, in rhyming couplets, which was so I wrote the piece, but it was unprintable. It was unprintable because clearly, as a poem, it was absurd. But I used to do those kind of games.
But you do have to be at a point in your career to be able to do that, though, a certain point.
Yes, so that it's now, what's annoying now is I've left the BBC, and I'm now, having played Snakes and Ladders, I'm back, I've fallen down a snake, Tommy Roberts said, and now I'm back at the bottom of the ladder, and I've got to crawl up again, and I've got to be nice to bosses, and it's really killing me.
It's not fun, is it? It's not fun. I totally get that.
It's difficult to. I mean, it's all right because I can write books, and I can do. Hopefully, I can. Well, everything's in trouble because of the virus, but I'm sure. Hopefully, I'll get through it. Hopefully, we'll all get through it. But yes, being a freelancer is different. It's a thing as an investigative journalist is if you're on salary, then you have a strong anchor with which you can ride tides which are running against you. The problem is the moment you're freelance, it becomes much more difficult to say, no, we're not doing that because it's not right.
Yeah, and as a journalist myself, I can totally relate to that. Sometimes you can't always, do things the way you want to do them. But just sticking with this topic and also just looking back, because when you're there out in the field, things don't obviously always go to plan, and we've seen that with a lot of news backlash that you've had off the back of all these different documentaries. So the Scientology one, for example, there was a bit of a riff, something happened, so things don't always go to plan. So when you're there on the scene, how do you make a call? How do you say, well, I have to do this, I'm going to do that? Because the documentary could either get cancelled, it could get shut down, it can go in a whole different direction, and then on top of that, you then have to explain to your colleagues back home why you made that call. So how do you deal with that?
Well, it's kind of remember, I'm just the pretty face, so I'm the gob on a stick. And with Scientology, I had a brilliant producer, Sarah Mole, and a brilliant cameraman, Bill Brown, and the three of us were a fantastic, funny team. And they used to take the piss out of me all the time. And I can remember the morning I lost my rag with Tommy Davis, and I went, "You were not there. You were not there for the beginning of the interview." All of that. I just said to Sarah, "Listen, I can't do this anymore because they were so annoying." And she just said, she's from Essex. She said, "Shut it and get on with your job." And and lo and behold, kapow! I lost it. And Bill said after I lost it, we managed to run away from them and have a thing. And Bill's from Northern Ireland. I'm going to do a bad Northern Irish accent, but he said,
You're not going to do it? You're not going to give it a go?
Yeah, no,
Oh, you are, okay.
Like, John, I got one thing to tell you. I'm leaving the BBC to join the Church of Scientology. And I was so broken at this point, I thought, fuck, Bill, you're really leaving? I said, no, fuck off, John. But anyway, I just at that moment I just had too much, and I couldn't contain my anger. And then in the middle of being angry, I remembered where we were, and then I said, "No, will you listen to me?" And then I went angry again, and it's completely weird, but it's a little index of the stress. And both Bill and Sarah, big tough journalists, and me, I suppose, doing Scientology, the mental psychological pressure, the games they played with us, it's one of the things that sticks in my mind. It's like, whenever you get threatening letters from fancy lawyers, and then I just go, well, yeah, but it doesn't compare with Scientology. What's sweet about it is people who've left the church. It's not a church; it's a space-selling cult. They say it isn't, but I don't. I think that's nonsense. But the ex-members said that one of the reasons they left was seeing the church demonize me with that incident and saying, no, there's something wrong here about the way the church is telling the story. So I feel weirdly proud of that little moment, embarrassing as it is, because it actually tells you more about them than it does about me.
And it kind of justifies why you did what you did.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't justify. I think what I did was wrong, but it's if you're in the public eye, you shouldn't lose your temper. However, it was the seventh day, and I'd been pretty good up to then, and then I was just on the seventh day, I just couldn't bear it any longer. So
you were able to make peace with what you did then.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like the public. We were undercover in Egypt a couple of years ago, me and a BBC producer. The airport's completely empty because of the terrorism. And we were, tourists don't go there anymore because of fear of terrorist attacks. And we're in the empty airport, and I meet an Egyptian Londoner who says, "You're that Scientology bloke." And James, my producer, was about 100 yards away. I said, "Hey, James, this guy recognizes me from Scientology." And James, from 100 yards away, "For fuck's sake, we're supposed to be undercover."
Oh my god. Yeah, so even that, it's interesting, right? When you just do so many different undercover pieces of work, you're no longer undercover anymore because people recognize you.
But not in North Korea.
Right, and that's where I want to get to now, because North Korea is a really interesting one, particularly for me, which is why I reached out to you, because it's something actually that when I was at university studying journalism, it was an ethical dilemma that our lecturers put to us. And for those that don't know, there was an issue to do with consent of the students that came with you. So they gave consent, but they weren't able to give informed consent because some information was held back. So can you talk us through this? Why did you make that decision?
Well, I've written a book about it, North Korea Undercover. So you can find that on Amazon. But I would say that the person who complained about what happened afterwards was 28, one of the students, And she wasn't honest in that she knew what we were doing. She recognized me. She was interested in being a journalist, and she took us to the fence. She got up at 6 o'clock or 5:30 one morning to take me and the cameraman to the fence. When I go, welcome, this is the real North Korea. So, and then her father was a very wealthy man. And what happened at the end, towards the end of the trip, is that she was befriended by the North Korean guide, and she, I think, was in some way turned by the North Korean guide. Her father was a wealthy man, a very wealthy man, and then applied, and then we started getting nasty legal letters from this man on behalf of his 28-year-old daughter. Now, the problem with the BBC is the BBC didn't want to go there. And there was a second problem in that Tony Hall was the new Director General, and he was a different kind of boss, but nothing like as good as Mark Thompson. Mark Thompson was the boss under Scientology, and he said, essentially, we're going to broadcast this. Tony Hall broadcast the North Korea program because it would have been bad not to, but we were we weren't allowed to defend ourselves in a way that I wanted to do so, and it was difficult. I also feel that there are roughly 100,000 people locked up in the North Korean gulag at the moment, and our documentary, which was seen by 5 million people when it went out, talked to that story. And actually, I apologize for losing my temper with the Church of Scientology. I do not apologize for what we did in North Korea. I think in the round, it was good journalism. It's difficult, always difficult. The easy solution is not to go and stop there, and therefore you don't get in. So so that's what I say about that.
Okay, and with all of this in mind then, because it seems like everything seems to be done for the greater good, and I think it seems that you've kind of seen that along the way. So what's your proudest moment within all of this?
So the proudest moment has to be the stories we ran when I first joined BBC in 2001 and 2002, 2003 about Professor Sir Roy Meadows' expert evidence, in which he gave evidence that cot deaf mothers, including Sally Clark, famously Sally Clark, she was the first case, that she had murdered her baby boys. And he did so saying that the odds of this happening were 73 million to 1. That's not true. If you have a second cot death, the odds of that happening are 1 in 60. So the jury was told something which was completely untrue and wrong, and she was convicted for murder. And we set out the case that he was wrong, and it was lonely to begin with. And at the end of it, she was freed by the Court of Appeal. And then I helped free Angela Cannings and then Donna Anthony. And so in 1 year, in 2003, I helped free 3 mothers who'd been wrongly accused of murder. And that is the best thing I've done in my entire life, apart from having my kids, which is different.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fantastic. I think, you know, with all the news that happens as a spin-off from all the different documentaries, to be able to say, well, no, I've done this, this and this, and that's why I do it, and that's what, you know, helps you sleep at night, as opposed to the vodka and the drink and whatever. And, you know, it's good to hear. But in terms of regrets then, is there anything which just sticks out to you and says that I should have done better?
Well, so your viewers or listeners to the podcast will know that may know that I was trying to do a documentary about Tommy Robinson, and basically one of his people affected to have been away from him, but in fact was still effectively working for him. And there's a film of me drinking too much and being a bit of an idiot. I don't think I said terrible things. I think they were embarrassing but not shaming. And I think that had Mark Thompson still been the Director General, he would have given me a kick and said, huh. But the way it played out was very difficult for me, because the BBC wouldn't put the film out. And we made a film on Tommy Robinson, but they wouldn't put it out while Tommy Robinson's trolls attacked me online, and also in person, in the flesh, because I'm a relatively well-known person. And so I was verbally challenged at the funeral of Lara McKee, who was a journalist who I knew a little bit, and she was shot dead in Derry. And here's one of Tommy Robinson's trolls having a go at me. So I've had my time over again. I would have done that story very differently, and I would have been much more aware. So that's something I regret that I got wrong. I think tactically, it's right to do stories about people on the far right because they are dangerous, I think, to our society. On the whole, there is nothing that stands out that makes me think, oh my God, that was a terrible thing to do. That may sound pompous.
No, I don't think it does at all. I don't
anyway,
think it does.
There's nothing. I don't lose sleep about anything about something I did, and I know what happened in North Korea. I don't lose sleep about it. I don't lose sleep about Scientology. I'm proud of the war reporting I've done. Have I made mistakes? Yes, obviously. I'm a human being. We all make mistakes, but it's there's nothing I'm ashamed of.
Okay.
That I would talk to you about anyway.
Maybe for another time, maybe another show, maybe another time.
When we could go to the pub,
Once we get to the pub, exactly. Just finally then, for young journalists, people looking to get into journalism, what tips and tricks would you say is the best thing to do?
Well, there's a number of things. First of all, be true to yourself. Never actually do anything that's wrong that you're going to lose stuff about. By the way, when I was a cub reporter, I just remembered, I used to have a knock on people's doors when they had terrible accidents and stuff. And there was one thing, this poor guy had run over his child, a toddler, in his car. And it was our job to go and knock on the door. And I wish I hadn't done it. And afterwards, I stopped doing those things. I pretend to do them, but not do them. So, number one, don't do anything that you know is morally wrong. Number two, work your contacts, whoever they are, work stories, talk to people. If you've got a good story, then flog it 10 times. To a woman's magazine, to a radio station, to a separate radio station, to do a podcast, to New Civil Engineer. If there's, you've got to think laterally. This is really hard. Newspapers are in massive trouble because of the virus. TV is becoming more centralized and more in-house. So it's very, very difficult. But nevertheless, the job of telling truth to power, that doesn't go away. And there are times when it is the best job on earth.
Like in 2003, like you said. John Sweeney, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you with us. And thank you so much for being so open, authentic and honest with us.
Cheers, pleasure.
So there you have those incredible stories straight from the horse's mouth. From North Korea to Russia to top tips to getting into journalism. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more incredible stories like this, then hit the like button, hit subscribe, comment below and let me know who you want to hear from next week.